Started. Can everybody take your seats, please? I'm just going to go through some of the ground rules. The ground rules. I know where my mind is today. I want to welcome you to yet another StoryShare. This one, what we did was last year at the Berlin Fair. If you came there, we have a gallery section with photos, and we decided to celebrate Berlin's icons, and that would be people, places, things that are representative of Berlin, that people, if they saw a picture, they'd say, that's in Berlin, or they'd say, that's in Berlin, but what is it? And as a citizen of Berlin, you should be able to identify these things and be ambassadors for our town. But they add a lot to the town's character. So before we get started with this, first of all, I want to introduce myself if you haven't been here before. I'm Lorraine Stubb from the Berlin Historical Society. This is Sally Caliandri, our president. In the rear we have Nancy Moran and Heidi Croft, who are scanning photos if you brought something you want to share with us. We have Danielle Wind on that side, Pam Pethigal, Janice Jacobs, all from the society that will run the mic around when you have something to say. And we have Mark Duplin, who is videotaping this. And if we can ever figure out how to share this with people, we will do that. So I wanted to also thank Tina Doyle and her staff for providing this space and the refreshments and setting everything up for us. So after we're done, I want to make sure you avail yourself of the refreshments, hang around, socialize. This is a kind of old home week when we have these things and you want to visit with people you don't get to see very often. We will have the drawing for the raffle when we're done with the slideshow, and you're going to win, whoever wins will get a couple mystery gifts from the Historical Society. Let's see. I also want to remind you that we welcome new members. A senior membership is only $10 a year, and we have some brochures back there where Nancy's scanning. And I also wanted to say we have an upcoming program. The museum will be reopening for the season on Saturday, March 14th from 1 to 4. And the program we're having is Richard Donahue, who's done a lot of research and taken a lot of pictures of World War I monuments, is going to talk about that. And people that saw him in Cromwell highly recommended this. So he's coming. So the way this works, Sally and I are going to show slideshows from our slides from our archive and talk a little bit about the history. But we want you to raise your hand and interrupt us whenever you have something to say, because this is all about you and gathering the stories. We love to hear what you have to say, and if you want to correct us, we love that too. Let's see. Oh, and also be thinking of what other programs you'd like to see. We're thinking about doing one on Berlin businesses, maybe on the brickyards, maybe on immigrants to Berlin. So be thinking about that and share with us what you'd like us to put together for another program. So today's program, we couldn't show you every icon we could think of. This is a representative showing. We have a book up here that has pages and pages of other icons you might want to peruse after the show. So we're going to get started and see what we have to offer here and what you have to say.
There are a couple of photos in here that we threw in that we really don't know that much about them, so we really do welcome your stories because we don't know everything. Sometimes it's so nice to hear even differing stories, so feel free.
Oh, and if you have something to say, raise your hand and wait till one of our members comes with the mic, And when you get the mic, announce your name if you could, so other people will know who's speaking and that we recorded who shared something. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start out with one of the things that I think we all learned in school in the long ago, that Berlin is the geographic center of the state. And for those who aren't quite sure exactly where that is, it's behind 12 Savage Hill in the swamps. And supposedly there was a marker there at some point, but I don't know if anybody has ever found it. It kind of has disappeared. But being the heart of Connecticut is kind of cool. And how many times have you corrected people? It's Berlin, it's not Berlin. Berlin is in Germany. And actually, most of the Berlins in the United States pronounce it Berlin. Why? We're really not quite sure. It might have something to do with how English people pronounced, town names. I mean, you've got Avon, you've got Farmington, you've got Canton, you've got a whole bunch of examples where the accent is on that first syllable.
Well, some people think that the pronunciation got changed after World War I because of Germany. But my grandmother, who was born in 1880 something, and remember growing up, and she said it was always Berlin, never Berlin. But one of my theories is that in the early days when it was named, maybe people had never met anyone from Berlin, Germany. If you're just reading the name, and if you're pronouncing it the way we would emphasize syllables here, maybe you just assumed it was Berlin rather than Berlin. Somebody has something to say.
It could be dialect too, because as we've written it, we've read. When I was in the Army, a guy came up and said, I know within a mile radius where you live. When I said we've read. So it's probably what it is, dialect.
And I also want to mention that at an auction, I got a Berlin Fair banner, and it was like 1917, and it's accented on the second, Berlin. For some reason, they put an accent on the Berlin part.
Interesting. It's still a mystery even after all these years. We still don't know why the town got its name, but Kathy Nelson and I have done some research over the years, and we kind of figured that they probably just came up with a compromise. Berlin, Germany, and Germany in general was very popular around the time of the American Revolution. And of course, Berlin was incorporated in 1785, so maybe that had something to do with it.
Well, I think the theory was that Frederick the Great of Prussia was greatly admired for being a Renaissance man and a friend to the colonies, and that in honor of the capital of Prussia, that they took the name Berlin.
Right, that could be. So now we're going to talk a little bit about industry. Of course, we go back to the old tin peddlers, and we've got industries all the way up into the digital age, and we continue to have a presence. One of the old standbys that we have that still has a presence in town is Berlin Iron Bridge. And this was a company that started out, it has actually vestiges in the tin, the manufacturing of tinner's tools in the 19th century. Became Berlin Iron Bridge, I think it was around the 1890s, am I wrong?
I can't believe Sally's asking me a date. She's the one that remembers all the exact dates.
But anyway, in the early, I think it was in the 1890s when it became Berlin Iron Bridge, and then through the succeeding decades, it is now, part of it is now Berlin Steel, so it still has a presence in town, even after all these years. Anybody have family who's worked at Berlin Iron Bridge?
Yes, now if you're driving on Farmington Avenue, you can see that Berlin steel sign where before you never even knew where it was. You know, it's a popular sign, you know.
It's behind the train station, but the original Berlin Iron Bridge was in East Berlin, where Stan Chem is now.
Some interesting thoughts. We still have a Berlin Iron Bridge. It's not in the greatest of shape. It's over the Manabasset and going into Cromwell.
You can see it if you go down to Cromwell and take the turn on Sabethy, just at the Burger King. And you go down
Right there,
the
yeah.
end of that and look across the river, and you can kind of see it to your right. And it goes over to property that's owned by somebody who owns the old Berlin, the East Berlin train depot.
I think it would be so nice to be able to rehab that. Now, I don't know how many, this was an interesting tidbit. I doubt if there's too many people who remember this bridge. The picture on the left is the old Portland Passenger Bridge, which was built in 1896 by Berlin Iron Bridge and was greatly damaged during the floods of 1936. The picture on the right, you can see the building of the Aragoni Bridge going up. That was started, I think, in 1936 and opened in 1938. And you can, underneath on the right, you can see they're still using the old bridge. And I think there's, I don't know if it's still there, but I remember when I was a kid, you could still see the come on over sign on the Portland side of the bridge.
I was going to say about Berlin Iron Bridge that they were so famous, and they built something like 1,000 bridges all over the country, and most of them that exist to this day are on the National Register of Historic Places. And at the museum, we have this huge fat binder with pictures of almost all of them. Some people have a hobby, when they travel around the country, they specifically look for these bridges. They're very distinctive. They're called a lenticular truss design because it looks like an eye, like a curve like that. And that was a patented thing for their company.
Catherine Bullock, there is one in Meriden called Red Bridge.
Yes,
right
you're
there
right.
in Over Pond, and it's right next to the Meriden Linear Trail. Not drivable anymore, they've got it blocked off because there's a new bridge next to it, but it's very popular, very well known in Meriden.
Right, it's right at it's near Hanover Pond and the Quinnipiac River Trail. And the Lions Club in Meriden actually restored that themselves. So it's needing paint again, but I think they call it the Little Red Bridge. Or Red Bridge. Thank you. Marilyn?
Is the old Berlin Steel Bridge across the Connecticut River, has it been changed to be the railroad bridge?
No.
Or is the railroad bridge south of there?
It's, yeah, it is south of there.
My husband used to drive a milk tanker. He was on the Aragoni Bridge and had a good view of the railroad bridge in time to see 3 railroad cars fall off the bridge into the river.
Oh my goodness.
And they sunk into the water just so that the roof was showing, and they just went all the way down the river. Some kids were fooling with the brakes.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, the railroad bridge is still there, though. It's not used.
Right. I think it got stuck. It used to pivot so that the trains could go through and then open so that for the river traffic. And I think it's been broken for many years now. But I don't know. I don't think it's used anymore.
Oh, Gary probably knows. He's a trained guy. Gary, wait until the microphone comes, okay?
It's still used.
Yeah.
The bridge is still working. There's a lot of business on the other side, over by the Providence and Worcester Railroad. We actually need to sold it. It's the Genesee and Wyoming Railroad. And I went to work for the railroad. One of the first jobs I had was to build that bridge. About 3 o'clock in the morning. It was raining and snowing. And we were shoving across. In other words, there would be a boxcar first, then a couple more cars, then the locomotive. We were shoving it toward the little town. So, being the first guy, new guy in the railroad, they made me ride that car. So I had a fuse in my hand, and I rode the car across the bridge in a snowstorm. And those guys were thinking, yeah, it was miserable, but I loved it. So, but they still use it. Genesee and Wyoming Railroad owns it now.
Any other stories? Okay. Berlin Savings Bank. Okay. How many remember the building on the lower left? I don't really. I just think it looks so cool. So, who's back there? Jan, you need your track shoes.
The building on the lower left,
Yeah,
that's, that's where the Berlin Savings Bank is now.
yeah.
And when I was younger, the right-hand side was the post office, then was Ronchetti's Meat Market, and Guyana Brothers General Store, and on the left was the Berlin Savings Bank, and up on top was apartments. Pop Anderson from the candy store lived up there.
Any other stories about Berlin Savings Bank? Been around, it was around since 1873.
I just wanted to make the comment, that's a great building that's been repurposed. If you look, it's just been adapted over the years, the shape of it.
Anybody else?
Art, wait a minute.
On the Berlin Savings Bank, George Konopka, who was an officer in the police department, and his son after him. But George Konopka lived on top of the bank when the bank got robbed. And I don't know what the result was, but he survived it. And I don't know whether he hid in the closet or just what happened, but he was living on top when they robbed the Berlin Savings Bank, and I don't know the year. It was a long time ago, I think in the 30s, or in the 30s. I don't know how much money was in there, but it was during the Depression. I don't think there was too much money in the bank.
So Mr. Konopka lived in an apartment up there?
Yeah, I don't know how long, but I've heard the story, but he lived up there for a period of time. And of course, he was one of the first constables in Berlin, and his son also was a constable, who many of us knew. But old George Konopka, I can remember him walking around, but he lived there, and I can't tell you for how long, but he did live on top of the bank.
I do remember at a previous StoryShare about downtown, somebody told the story about the bank robbery. Oh, Marilyn. Oh, do you want to retell it?
Oh, you're fine.
I don't know if you remember the name Frank Shady. Frank Shady from the New Britain Fresh Air Camp. He was a friend of my grandfather's, and a friend of my father's. And when I was a little girl and he was visiting, he told the story about going to the bank with a deposit in a paper shopping bag. And it happened to be like within days of the robbery. And Frank said to the teller, "Guess what I've got in here?" And everybody dropped to the floor.
I think their nerves were on edge.
I guess. All right. Stan Chem, which is on Berlin Street in East Berlin. What I've read, I don't know a heck of a lot about the company, to be honest, but I understand it was established in 1968. I wouldn't be surprised with a name like Stan Chem that it has some relationship to the Stanley family. Somebody can tell me that if I'm right or wrong.
Rich, do you know?
There was a subsidiary of the Stanley Works,
Rich Huckle.
it was owned by the Stanley Works, it produced some of the paint that was used in some of the, I believe, the tape roll manufacturing. But in fact, some of the executives from Stanley, after Stanley sold Stan Chem, moved over to the new company and headed it up. But it's no longer part of the Stanley family of companies, but it was at one time.
Thanks. Please.
My dad worked for Stanley Chemical for like 45 years. What they mostly made were the lacquers and the thinners that went with the paint. But as I say, I remember when the big flood of 38, that my dad had to get down there and they literally lassoed all the drums with ropes and tied them so they wouldn't go down the river. But they did lose a lot of drums down there.
You know, it's interesting you bring up about the floods, because I've been listening to some of the old recorded oral histories, and somebody was talking about how 1936 they had snow that rivaled like the blizzard of '88 snow. And I think what happened was when it started raining so much in that spring, and you had all the snow melt in New England, that added to it. And then of course then you had the hurricane. So that was like a monumental weather year. Because we have a lot of pictures of East Berlin being flooded at that time.
Right. I think it was really two separate events, because the floods of 36 were then, and the big hurricane was 1938. I grew up on stories from both of those events, and one of them, my aunt, who was in the first graduating class of 1936, she told a story about a whole bunch of, I don't know if it was the entire senior class, but a good chunk of them decided they were going to skip school and go up to Hartford to check out the flooding. And then they came back. I guess they didn't get into too much trouble, but it's interesting.
Also during the hurricane, one of the older people, Halligan, till he had one of these big, huge, black, I'd call hearse cars, and he heard about the hurricane coming. So what he did, he drove up to Hubbard School, and he packed as many kids as he could get in the thing, and he drove each one of them home. And then when he finally did get home, a big tree fell behind his driveway. But he did get us all home safely in that big, huge car.
Any other Stan Chem stories?
Well, I was just going to say, like, part of the Stan Chem building complex is the original Berlin Iron Bridge building. You have to drive in there, and it's kind of hard to pick out, but I have seen it. And they also have a fish ladder there, which I'm dying to see sometime.
Anything else on StanChem? Okay. One of our biggest industries, if not the biggest, was the bricks. And that's a long, long story that goes back to the Ice Age, because all the clay that was deposited was because a large chunk of town was beneath a big lake, and when the lake receded, it left this wonderful clay. They really didn't discover it until they were building the railroads in the 1830s. And when it happened at a time when some other clay deposits in the country were kind of drying up. So Berlin and central Connecticut kind of became the brick capital of the world through the end of the 19th and into the early 20th century. Probably, at least half of the people in this room have family members who worked in the brickyards. I would bet money on that. So you had a lot of, it kind of has an interesting history, and I should have Nancy come up because she's been doing a lot of research on the bricks, on the brickyards.
I was wondering, were the people that owned the brickyard, were they local people?
Some of them were. Some of them were. The very first commercial brickyard in town was owned by the Dunham family, and the Dunhams were here from like very early on in the 18th century. But the first brickyard was somewhere around Floride Road / Burnham Street, in that area. Am I right, Nan?
Yes.
Okay. All right. She's going to come and talk. Hi.
So the first commercial brickyard, as Sally was saying, was opened in, commercial brickyard being the key word, opened in the 1840s sometime by Cornelius Dunham. And he actually is noted for producing bricks that built several buildings in New Britain, which of course are no longer there, but like a Tuttle factory, etc. He sold his business, so he was located, if you think of Burnham Street and Fore Rod Road, he was located south of that point. He sold his business in 1851 to Loyal Moulthrop, who was from North Haven. As Sally said, the New Haven clay pits were drying up, or I shouldn't say drying up. They were being exhausted. So Loyal started again more and more brick, and that spawned a whole number of people coming into Berlin and digging and having bricks all over and making bricks. We put up on the slide Merwin. It was one of the earliest brick companies to open, and actually it was one of the last ones to close. It ended up being under an umbrella of Eastern Brick Company. There were 3 companies under there, and it closed sometime in the 50s. Donnelly Brick, of course, being the last one to close in about 1962 or 63. So over the course of time, there were billions of bricks that were produced right here in Berlin. It's really significant. How many of you have family that was involved in the brick industry at all? That is amazing. And the brick industry forever changed the complexion of the town too, in terms of the people in the town. I read an article once that said the original workers in the brick industry were the Yankees. This is a quote, so please don't think that I'm biased at all. Then the Irish who worked on the railroad started in the brick industry, and so the Yankees no longer did the manual labor, the Irish did. And then the Italians came, and the Irish were elevated to like the leaders, the managers. And then we also had Poles and Swedes come in, and then later African Americans from the South that were actually recruited to come up here. So it really did change our town in terms of the people that were here. Yes? Merwin was, if you think about where the train station is, it was right along the northbound trains, the train line going toward Hartford. Well, yes, it would be on, if you're thinking of the line, it would be on the east side of it. And Donnelly was actually on the Britain spur, the railroad line went behind McDonald's. That's the way you think about it. Excuse me? The Clark Brickyard was located off of Commerce Street, and actually, if anybody is a golfer, there is a driving range called Torsos. That is where the clay pit was. Yes.
Can you turn up the volume a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Still on the brickyard? It's on?
Yes.
Just wanted to make a little comment. Thanks to the brickyards, they provided us growing up in the 30s and 40s with all the recreation we ever needed. Swimming, fishing, ice skating, it was all there. And it was great fun. We didn't need no park and recreation committees or nothing.
Well, but you have plenty of ponds to choose from, right? If we go to the next slide too, because you know our town is filled with remnants of the brick industry. There are no longer any surviving brick sheds where they actually would make the bricks and dry the bricks. But you can see on the now that's an iconic picture, definitely. That is the crane sticking out from the water in what is known as the Carbo brick pond that ultimately I think was also used by Donnelly. But it has a flag on it now, so I'm sure most of you have seen that, and it always is a mystery for the people who drive by. What is that crane sticking out of the water? Many years ago, the police actually did a dive to look to see what that crane was like. We couldn't get a make and model, but it does have a wood cab on it. So I think it probably was from around 1917 or so, that crane. So the upper right picture is a picture of when they started draining the ponds near Home Depot. So there is a pretty big clay pit pond there near Home Depot still, but they found the tracks when they started filling in that pond because that was the site of the American Brick Company and owned by George Pickett, and they had a dinky train. They had a train that they used to mine the clay and then go across the street on the other side of Deming Road to the sheds. The bottom picture, so here's clay ponds still in use, right? That's Veterans Park over near Stop and Shop. So there are two clay pits right near Stop and Shop. So our town is still, we had a lot more, but our town is still, that was from the Murray Brickyard. And our town is still filled with remnants of the brick industry.
Nancy, tell why the crane is still there, though. People always ask.
There's all these different theories about why the crane is still there. But one of the most probable story is that Carmel went out of business and just couldn't get and just kind of left it at the beginning of the Depression. There are some stories about that the pond filled in, but a geologist has told me that it's improbable that a pond would fill in a clay pit would fill in that quickly. Does anyone have a story?
Hello. My father lived on Christian Lane, and supposedly, I guess if it was Carbo, nobody around him would sell land, but the deeper he went, the better clay he got. And he knew the storm was coming with the flood, and he put the crane on the highest plateau that he had. And after the flood, he couldn't, I don't know the whole story, if he pumped it once or he didn't pump it, but it never moved again.
Yeah, would make sense. We have another story here.
Yeah, I lived in this town all my life, and I know the history, a lot of the history on that crane. And the story was that that I heard. I mean, there's a lot of stories that went around, and that gentleman's right. That crane and several chain drive trucks that they were hauling the clay out, they got down so deep that they were spring fed. They hit springs down in there, and like the gentleman said, it came on, and they either the pumps that they had in there overnight shut down, and it got flooded out, and they couldn't retrieve them. It wasn't feasible to try and save them. That crane also is a steam shovel, and when they went down to check it out, they found out that the cabinet was filled up with silt. And I know when they built the, I think it was Aragoni, come up from Massachusetts, when they put Route 9 through, rumor had it that they were going to try and retrieve it to pull it out, and they put a couple of Caterpillar V8s on it, and it wouldn't even move it. They just spun and said, rather than wreck it, they left it alone. And yeah, that's a monument in town. It's been here a long time, ever since I've been there. Some of the people, I know one of the fellows, one of our local families, the Bowman family, actually got paralyzed swimming there and dove off it, and actually hit his head in there and was paralyzed from the crane itself. But going back to the ponds in Berlin, all these ponds were man-made ponds. They were on Farmington Avenue, where the CVS was. Used to be the old original ponds, and as long as they were man-made ponds, you could fill them in. And if they were natural ponds, no, you couldn't fill them in. And several of them on Christian Lane, on the left-hand side from CVS there, and all those ponds were filled in. In fact, I remember the old fellows, Charlie Giannoli had a package store right there on across from Victory Market. They called it, make it now it's Kensington Market. But that whole strip was all pond, all the way right along that whole strip, or everyone, Mary's New Pastry Shop and all that, was all brickyard ponds. And also, I have a couple of the antique wagon wheels. They're very, very large wheels that I acquired from the Chakowski family. When Bud Mill passed away, his son, they were cleaning the cellar out when he sold the house over on Chamberlain Highway. He had a cellar, a den down there, which had a lot of the archives. And some of them were the big wagon wheels that were part of the Donnelly Brickyard. They're very, very large. I mean, probably 4 foot high and 6 inches wide. So I got them on display down to the Tractor Museum at the Berlin Lines ground. So anybody running through, you'll see not only the tractors, but you can see some of the history in Berlin there. And you're welcome to come down here anytime. It's free.
Thank you for that. Gary?
Got a brick story for you. Harold Clark. It's Berlin, Brickyard. His son, George Clark, is married to Mona Kramer, Mona Clark. She lived here in town. In the 1940s, George went to a private school in Tilton, New Hampshire. Tilton School. He was a junior and senior, and George got in trouble. So Tilton was adding on at the time, making the school bigger, so they all got together and made a deal. So our old Clark loaded 2 boxcars full of bricks and sent them over to Tilton. So that George wasn't in trouble anymore. And I was sitting at Donnelly's desk this morning. I had the Vice President of Donnelly's Brickyard's desk over top. And I'm going to burn it tonight.
All these wonderful artifacts when we get to the meeting house.
I know.
We'll have room for those. Thank you all.
Okay. Any other stories about the brickyards? Come on, we gotta have some more. Steam Yeah? Okay. An interesting, if for those of you that are computer savvy, if you Google in Yukon Magic Maps, you'll come to a wonderful old map site associated with Yukon and the State Library. There's a 1934 aerial map of the state of Connecticut, and you can see these wonderful pictures of the brickyards and all of the ponds right along Farmington Avenue. There's nothing there but ponds, and it's so cool to see. Okay, another iconic place, American Paper Goods. There has been some sort of an industry on this site for at least 300 years. There was a sawmill there run by the Bronson family from the early 1700s. And there were assorted factories that came and went. The Hart family, go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to get back to the clay pits again.
Sure.
When the highway went through New Britain, I to the old Styles and Reynolds clay pit, I'm looking, and they built New Britain with the bricks out of there, and they put them right back when they knocked it down.
Some archaeologists will have a great time in a couple hundred years. So American Paper Goods was founded around, I think it was 1893, and I might be off a year or so. But you know, a lot of people, if you didn't work in the brickyards, you worked at paper goods. My grandfather worked there for many years, and I didn't even realize it until I got into some of the history of town. One of the neat icons that we have is the amphora cup that you see pictured here with the "We are happy to serve you" and the Greek key motif along the rim and the base. This was designed by Mr. Leslie Buck, and I don't remember the year. Kathy, do you know?
It was in the 60s.
1960s?
In the 60s, yeah.
Okay, all right. And it's really neat. Sometimes you can see this out of the blue if you're watching a TV show or watching an old movie. All of a sudden you see this cup and it's like, hey, this was made in Berlin, Connecticut.
Well, I think like every cop show on TV, like, oh, look, there's the amphora cup.
Right.
And if you go to New York, like a lot of the shops still use that, and even out in LA,
Right.
it's amazing like how far that spread and that design. And he wasn't even a designer; he was a marketing manager or something. And he just came up with this idea, and it was marketed primarily to diners, and the diners were owned by Greeks, and they liked the design, but it just caught on everywhere. Does anybody here have family that worked for American Paper Goods? No, quite a few. Yeah. Sandy, do you want to say something? Oh, wait for the microphone.
And you get roller skates for you, Jim.
In my family, we either had zippers, paper cups, or bricks.
Or zippers?
Zippers
For presses.
Right. We had hundreds of different sizes and colors of zippers. Of course, they take them, they didn't buy them.
They took them? We won't tell. It's a perk of working there.
Right.
Get samples.
Right. I like this picture here that shows the original design of the front that's now curved. And another interesting thing that you can see is if you look way in the back, you can see the spire from the original St. Paul's Church, which burned in 1913. When we did this We had so many comments the last time we used this picture.
We actually had somebody from the family here when we did this before,
Right.
Mr. Nelson.
Right, the Old Hearts Bakery on Percival Avenue. They had the best donuts.
How many people had a donut from there?
Right, and they had great big beans too, I remember that. Some other things too.
One of our other get-togethers, there was a man who told us about the front part of that building. The old part was a portable from Hammonasset that they moved up here.
Oh, I don't remember that. Yeah. I think what's neat is that it's now a private home and it's still in the family. Yeah, it is neat. I think the donuts were originally made.
Did Ann want to say something? Or
I want to talk about the bakery. When I first got married, my husband said, I want to go over there and get some donuts. So I said, fine. You know, being a new bride and everything, I was happy. I didn't have to make breakfast. Anyway, he brought the donuts home. I ate one. I was so full that I never was hungry for the rest of the day. You ate one of those donuts, if you ate two of them, I don't think you ever ate again until the next day. But they were very good, but
Okay. Here's another place that's still very popular, the old Mill Street Diner. Oh, okay. Okay.
Tark's Bakery, we used to hang around there too, and Norman Hart used to let us fill our own donuts. I mean, we shove it on that pump, and the pump is so full, you know, it's useless. But I was wondering if you were ever back on the paper business, if you did anything on Bill Emerson's paper factory. Do you have any information on Grove Hill, the big house with the barn in the back of it? Bill Emerson and his sisters made them flat cups that were put on railroad trains. And we would go up there in the summer, and his basement, all this scrap paper was in a great big bin. And the thing was to go play in the papers at Bill Emerson's. And in the summer, we just roll around in there and then scrap papers for hours. I don't know if you've had any information on that yet. Thank you.
Mr. Maselli, Alan Zipadelli told me that story because he grew up on Grove Hill.
Yes.
And I often wondered, like, was that his own business or was it somehow an offshoot from paper goods?
The story that I heard, I don't know if it's true, that it is an offshoot, maybe from American Paper Goods, and he started his own. And that barn is still there and the house is still there. And his two sisters, I believe, and when you went in there, they asked permission to play in the paper. Two ladies, older ladies working on the machines, and Bill, who was an outspoken town hall type of guy, you know, he was on town meetings all the time. Because I know when my uncle wanted to build the Main Street package store around the corner, he gave him a lot of opposition there. But anyway, yeah, I see Bob Zipadelli most every day, and we reminisce about playing in the papers. And what you did after you got done playing in the papers, you walked across the street to Buckley's Bakery and got some nice fresh bread.
Oh, yum.
You know, I've had people describe, because I didn't grow up in that part of town, but back when the Emersons owned all that land that got developed, like how idyllic that was. But I kind of miss things like that.
It's nice, that's why it's nice to be able to remember those. Okay. All right, the Mill Street Diner, which has morphed into, I don't know how many names it's had since, but it's now Uncle D's. And I understand they have a wonderful breakfast. My kids recommend it highly. So they haven't taken me there yet. I don't have to.
I've been there, it's very good.
Yeah.
And I think, and maybe it's just in the summer, but Friday nights they have old cars show up.
So that's a new old icon. I think they used to have really good French fries when it was the Mill Street Diner. Okay. Yeah, you're on.
Oh, I'm sorry, was the Mill Street Diner moved from New Britain at one time, from New Britain?
That's a good question, I don't
I
know.
always heard that it was moved from West Main Street to
Oh, that's interesting.
Berlin.
Anybody know?
I had the same recollection. My understanding was the old Lincoln Diner on West Main Street, opposite what used to be the old Friendly's Ice Cream.
Oh, okay.
And I think I was out of the state at the time, but if I recall, sometime in the 70s or 80s perhaps, that was closed down and the highway came through, that they moved that diner.
Oh, that
I
is so
don't
cool.
recall, I would think there'd be some photographic evidence that something that big moved, but that's the story I heard as well.
That is cool. Anybody else have comments about that?
Yes, I believe it was the Lincoln Diner that was moved.
Well, there were two diners moved out of New Britain at that time. One was on the Franklin Diner. If I'm correct, there was one by Franklin Square by the high school in New Britain. That came to Berlin. And the one by Friendly's, that's the one in East Berlin, if I remember correctly. Friendly's still exists. That's in Walnut Hill, across from the library in Britain. The building, it was the old Friendly's building, they moved it down into the center of town. The two diners from New Britain are in Berlin. I don't know which one is which.
Thanks, because that's why we like to have these things, because there's so much that we don't know. And to get that information is really helpful. Okay. Love this picture. Okay. And I don't remember exactly when the Linnea came to Berlin, but I think it was late 1800s.
Well, it's been there about 125 years, so.
I know there was a fire, it burned once and was rebuilt on site. So, I wish Barbara Riegel was here because she can, yeah. So, but,
Chris Lynch, I grew up in town here. No, the fire was not in that building, it was behind it where the boxcar is.
oh, okay,
And if you go over there now, there's a cinder block building that's quite a bit newer than the rest of it.
yes.
That's the part that burned.
Oh, okay.
It was during the World Series of the Red Sox and the Reds too. We had somebody's car in the middle of the street with the radio on full blast. They were trying to listen to the ball game while we were putting the fire out.
That is cool. It's just, I love the smell. When you go into that barn, it's like, they gotta have chestnut beans in there. It's just, and a cigar in the office is Marilyn.
I hope people are going to that business and buying things there because I want to make sure they stay in business, and it's very important to support places like this that reuse old buildings.
Gary, we'll get to you.
Oh, I love when
This word now.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
I delivered the last boxcar there. They were getting cars about once every couple of weeks. The cars would come in on our, and we bring them down on a local freight. And so we put the last one in. Put the last ones in at Rolling Products too. And I used to work at Rolling Products and they fired me a couple of times. And then I showed up bringing their rail cars in and they were panic stricken.
I always like when Barbara Riva, who was a Lavianic granddaughter and ran the business with her sister, she told the story about during the Depression, grain would come in calico sacks, which is kind of interesting, and that it became so popular to reuse the fabric from the sacks, that wives were telling their husband when they went to the grain store, well, get me a pink one this time or something, because I need more of that color or whatever. But we have, Barbara gave us 3 of them that we have at the museum. But I just thought that was a wonderful story about the Depression.
That was common all over the country though for farm families. Farm women always had dresses made from the feed sacks. I don't think it was just during the Depression.
Okay, good point.
Okay, any other stories about Lavinians? A little bit of a, this is actually 2 different garages. The one on the right is Central Garage, which that building is still there. And you can still see the mobile flying horse. I spent a lot of time there when I was little. My dad was a good friend of Wes Dickinson's, who was Lauren Dickinson's father, for those who've been in town for 100 years like me. And my dad used to spend a lot of time down there, and I used to run around there all the time myself. The garage on the right, on the left, excuse me, is Farmington Avenue Garage, which was down near where the Citgo station is, Mill Street and Farmington Avenue. So, and that building's not there anymore, at least. It's, part of it is gas pumps for the Citgo station now. Yeah. Yeah.
This is going back to the Labenics.
Yeah.
Was there a farm around there? I mean, or was that, I know they were there and got everything in from the railroad, when the railroad delivered stuff.
I think that was always a business. I think.
No, was it just a supply store to farmers?
So what was it, just used to sell?
It was just feed and grain store.
Feed, okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. And we used to get our chicken feed there when we had chickens back in the... Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you got the Mysterio's garage on the left.
Right.
Mario Mysterio.
Right.
So-called Mysterio Drive. But just up a little was Johnny Mysterio's package store. And then in back of that, their sister, I forgot her first name, her married name, had a little greenhouse, sold plants. So that was all a little Mysterio square here. Now, of course, it's Citgo.
Right. But that's how Mysterio Drive got its name. Am I right? Mush Mysterio. Yeah.
There's an interesting story with Mysterio. When you're driving down there, if you look at Mysterio Drive, it's spelled different than Mysterio Park. There were 2 John Mysterios. This is the story I heard. There were 2 John Mysterios, and the mail used to get mixed up. So one of them changed his name, so one has, I think, the E and the other has the I. But it's basically the same family. But if you go in there, you think it's a misspelling, it's not.
That's cool. Gary?
Quick story about Mush Mysterio. He was a big guy, tough guy. New Britain, you had the New Britain Herald, the Vance family. She had a white Rolls Royce. And it was custom done, it had a pink interior. If you ever saw her around, she always wore white and pink. Mush bought the car, driving around Burl. And it was quite a sight to see him pile out of that thing. That's it.
Okay. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was our volunteer fire departments, because they've had such a wonderful place in our history. And here's one where I do get my dates confused, but I know the first one was the East Berlin Fire Department. It was sometime in the 30s. 40s, I thought it started. The building was the 40s, but I thought it was established in the 30s, but I could be wrong. So.
But I believe East Berlin was 1931.
Okay.
They were the first ones in town. From what I understand,
Right.
they covered the entire town on East Berlin.
Right, right. And I remember when I was in high school, all the East Berlin boys would sign up as soon as they hit 16. They would sign up to be members of the fire department. I just think that's so awesome. So, okay. And then I think the next one was Kensington. I don't know where that first building on the left was. Was that on the site of Joel's? Is it? Okay.
I don't know where that building on the left should, but just a note on the Kensington Fire Department was founded by Lino Gironi, the first president. He was the first president of Kensington Fire Department, the founder, and he was killed in the South Pacific during World War II. And that's a story on him. Bob Ziparelli was here. He might know that building on the left. I'm trying to get him here.
Okay. It almost looks like it could be the same building as where Joel's is now, but that then they added a second floor. Just looking at it, but I could be wrong. Okay. I do remember stories that the first ambulance that we had in town was an old hearse. So, and here's one of the, I think one of the later ones.
Sally?
Yeah,
The ambulance there?
yeah.
Well, that was a wonderful service the town put out for us. You know, had to go to hospital or something, and go for free. Now it costs you a fortune.
That's right. I know. I think it's a credit to the volunteers in town that we were able to keep it that way for as long as we did. Yeah. Okay. Then we have Berlin Fire Department on the highway. And the new kid on the block, South Kensington. I can't remember exactly when that was. Go ahead.
I'll go back to Berlin.
Yeah.
The older truck on the left on the previous slide there, that was there. When I joined, that was a 1946 Ford that was still in service as a brush truck. And the story I heard was the chassis was donated by Sunshine Biscuit on Farmington Avenue. Because if you opened the hood, it was still yellow on the inside. And let's see, I think it had like a 250 gallon per minute power takeoff pump with a small booster tank. But by the time I was active, it was a brush fire truck. But the old timers used to tell about the story about going through a brush fire on Mount Lamentation one time. They drove over a rock and it jarred the hose bed just enough for the hydrant gate to fall off, and it snagged on a tree root. So they went all the way up Lamentation Mountain laying the hose. They didn't know about it until later. They had to pick it all up on the way back down. But the truck was in service until the late 70s. We got to the point they couldn't find parts for it anywhere.
Yeah.
And I remember Ed Haber telling us at the time that you call up looking for parts and they just laugh at them. So I know the department sold it. The last we heard back in the 70s, it made it out to Michigan. Somebody out there had it, but I don't know where it would be now.
South Kensington Fire Department was organized in March of 1960. And they went active in, I believe, the fall of 61, and somebody here's house burned down.
It didn't burn down.
Well,
It was just damaged.
It had a heck of a fire there that night. That was our first fire.
South Kensington,
My house was your first fire? Wow.
while we're on South Kensington, I guess everybody knows that was the old Blue Hill School on top there. A lot of us went to school there. When I went there, it was industrial arts, but still there. They just added on to it.
Another great case for repurposing buildings.
I've got a little story that you probably heard before, Lorraine, but when he probably remember the same story, but my good neighbor Eddie Reynolds was among the first that went to your house on fire. And as he was putting the hose in through the back, there was a broken window that he was getting access to. And as he's leaning in, a bathtub from upstairs came down.
Oh my goodness.
Almost took his head off. Do you remember that, Pete?
This was long before I lived there.
Go ahead, Gary.
The ambulance, at that time, anybody could drive the ambulance. You had to have just a course on first aid. I was a volunteer for a while, so I got fired from there too. But we used to, the siren would go off, the siren would go once, the ambulance, and then we'd go down and get it and go off. Going to Harvard one time, one guy wanted to go to Harvard. We didn't know anything, just make him comfortable and take him to the hospital. This guy wanted to go to Harvard. I got to Harvard. I didn't know where the hospital was. So I stopped at a gas station. I just asked the guy, and the siren's still going and the lights are on, and he told me how to get to the hospital. We got the guy there. We don't do it like that anymore.
Here. I can remember the ambulance, Pepe Lanzoni, he was a selectman for years, and he was the driver. To this day, he was a mild-mannered, laid-back guy. I can't imagine him going 70 miles an hour to get to an accident, but he went to so many accidents, and he was just a loyal fireman as well as an ambulance driver. But I can remember the South Kensington Fire Department when they were forming. I was mayor at the time, or first selectman. And I think it was Roger Naldi, if I got the name right. He came to me and said, you better give us a lot of help. We have a lot of votes down in South Kensington. I said, anything you need. But they worked hard. The South Kensington firemen worked so hard to make that a success, and it's been for years and years was just a wonderful addition to the fire department, and certainly was needed in that section of town.
I just have something to say about the Kensington Fire Department. Mr. Powers, my uncle was Joe Lanzoni, who you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And we would have family picnics. And of course, he was one of the volunteers. And as soon as that alarm went off, he'd just throw up whatever he was eating and just take off. And I didn't know he drove that.
Yeah, he was one of the most wonderful men I ever knew. We'd have selectmen meetings. He always was so supportive of what for the town of Berlin. He was just a wonderful guy, never looking for any, slaps on the back. He was just a wonderful selectman. I think he was selectman for like 23 years on the board.
Okay. Our train stations, transportation. I think Berlin is where it is today because of the railroad when it came through in the 1830s. And then when they put another line into Middletown around 1850, they changed the location of the train station to its current place. We still have hopes that maybe we can get something there to commemorate the station that we lost. Time will tell. We also had 2 other stations in place. Not too many people know about the Beckley station, which started out as a house. Huh? Yeah? Yeah. It's hard to see, but on the, actually in both photos, you could see there was a post just to the right of that little L that's sticking out close to the tracks, that when there'd be like a little arm that would be out if there was somebody to get picked up at the station. And if there was nobody there, then they could just go straight through. But you also had kids going to school from Beckley Quarter when they put the high school in over at KGS. Some kids would ride the train from Beckley and also from the East Berlin station as well. So this is the East Berlin station. That one is still there. Yeah. So, any stories about any of our train stations?
I just wish the guy in East Berlin would fix up the station.
Would be nice.
We tried to talk him into making it into his office, because it could look really nice.
I just want to ask, where was the Beckley station located? What street was that?
On Weathersfield Road.
Yeah.
What's that new street? There's a street that goes into an industrial park down that way now.
White Oak Drive, I think it's near there.
Before Bacon and...
Okay, this has gotten so many hits on our Facebook page. That's the pool.
So the pool was, of course, opened by the Lions Club. They actually hand dug this mud hole and diverted the stream into it to create this swimming hole. And it opened July 4th, 1947, and it was dedicated to the youth of Berlin in memory of the boys who died in service of their country in World War I and World War II. And it operated for many years, and I know a lot of people have fond memories of swimming there. It was really unique. I was a lifeguard there after it was paved over, so it changed a lot then, but it was still like really unique to have a pool where there were picnic tables and grassy areas, and for little kids it was ideal because you could just walk right in and it was very safe. But I know a lot of people, Gary was very involved in the pool. When I started as a lifeguard there, Dave McCain was the head lifeguard, and I noticed that he's now being inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame. So I don't know if anybody remembers him other than Gary and I, but does anybody have any stories about Memorial Pool to share?
Yeah, I'm in the Berlin Lions Club, and I lived down the street from there, lived there all my life. Yeah, that was never hand dug. It was dug by the Hamilton family. Cliff Hamilton, his father went in there and dug it with his dozer, and dug it all out. And the original swimming pool was all sand, the bottom of it and everything. And the water to fill that pool was a brook that's down right now, if you go by there, where the Kokomo family built a couple houses. But the brook used to run in on, actually in that picture would be the south end to the left-hand side. And they actually had planks that you put in to regulate the height of the water in the brook. And the brook would feed it in the morning or all day long and run in and go out to the south end over there on the western end. And come in there early in the morning, you see pollywogs all around the outside of it and sand. And every once in a while, occasionally, you see a little black snake going across the water and stuff. But they never bothered anybody, and then in the end, they put a pump house in. And actually, the bottom of it was, at one time I thought they said they cemented it, but they didn't. It was asphalt. And they put all the plumbing underneath that, and it was hard to keep from freezing and deteriorating. And every year, all our Lions members used to go down there and have to paint it and re-resurrect it every year. And at one time, they took and piped the brook all the way over to the left-hand side. And recently, when they sold the property, they opened it back up again. They had to go through the strict regulations with environmental protection, and that property and everything went actually, we were going to donate it back to the town, but the town didn't want to have it because it was too dangerous with the hills coming down both ways. He said it would be a sight danger for people coming in and out of there to build anything, so it fell by the wayside. And actually, a fellow in New Britain bought the property, car wash, and then he started to resurrect it but ran out of money, and then other people got involved in the Kokomo family and stuff. But yeah, when we were kids, we swam in that place and everything. We had a lot of fun in that place. Yep, that was donated by the Rudnick family out to the left, and partially by the Munson family on the left-hand side, which when I grew up as a kid, I worked for, not the Rudnicks, I knew them, but I didn't, I worked for the Munson dairy farm.
For years, I was trying to find out who that guy was. I don't know who he is.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jan. Go ahead.
The memorial pool has many, many memories. First, all my children swam there. I mean, that was it. You had to go down there every afternoon and swim. But then as they got older, they became lifeguards. And then they became members of the Berlin swim team, which was very good at one time. But it was a nice place to go.
Go ahead, Janice.
Just a little history. When John Graham was first selectman, he was the one who proposed it. He said that when he was in the service, that it was his dream to come back to Berlin and build a swimming pool. And when he got to be selectman, that's when he got involved in building the pool. And the pool was used in the summer. The school buses and all went down there. The kids just loved that pool. But it's seen its better days, and then we built several other pools in town after that, too, so the whole town could be taken care of. But my recollection is that John Graham was the one who proposed it.
I got a pool story for you. I started going down there when I was 13, then swim team, then I became a lifeguard. I worked first at Payne Mountain, then a memorial pool. So we'd have swim lessons in the morning. A lot of times the kids would get there before we got there. Gates would be closed. Parents would dump them off at the first gate. They'd go down onto the beach and just hang around. They didn't go in the water, they didn't go in the pools. So I came down one day, opened the main gate, went over to the second gate, and I started walking in. About 10 kids, they're screaming. They're running toward me. You run right past me and disappear out the gate. So I got to find out what's going on. So I go down to the end of the pool. In the swim team, the night before, they went down and they found some old bones from a cow. And they stuck the bones on the beach. And then they made little footprints like a monster coming out of the water, go up to the bones and back into the water. And that was it for those kids. I don't think I ever saw them. This picture showed up in Facebook, and there's a Ford in this picture. It's near that second gate. That's Dave McCain's car. So I spent quite a few years there, and someday we'll do a story in the pool.
You know, Gary has a lot of slides of the pool, and we've been talking about doing a program just on Memorial Pool.
Just a little thing, but I wonder how many people remember there was a ski jump on the hill where the boys were standing.
I think we may have mentioned that in a prior,
I think so. Yeah, it was the ski club. Yeah.
we have pictures of that. We could have included that, but
Yeah.
we could be here all day talking about
Yeah.
these things.
The next 3 days. Yep.
I remember one day walking to Memorial Pool, of course our parents were working, so we didn't have rides, so we walked from wherever we were. And a very nice gentleman stopped and offered to give us a ride to Memorial Pool. That was our powers.
Okay.
Here today? Yes,
Right there. Okay. Now, we put this one in. We don't have very many pictures of sporting events in our archives, and we'd like to remedy that. So, I don't know a lot
I think
of...
Mr. Maselli knows something.
Okay.
I don't know too much. In 1938, I was only 3 years old, but I do remember this picture being shown. And in it is Mr. Joe Simeone, Kathy's father and Tina's father, and the first president of the first graduating class in Berlin High. A great guy. I worked with him in the Kensington post office for years. He was my mentor. He taught me everything. I loved the guy, and his children show that what a guy he was. But I think much Canucks in there. I do have someone that has all the names of these people. I will get it to you. They're really icons of the town. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, any other comments? Marilyn? Okay.
Does anybody remember Steve Alley? Remember Chamberlain Highway, just south of Wallace Garage?
Ski Valley was on the Chamberlain Highway just south of Wallach's Garage. There's a big downslope and then a big upslope up to where, what's his name?
Mr. McClatchy.
Yeah, McClatchy's mansion is. But they used to, you know, how many weeks of the year could it be open? But they had a ski lift and everything.
Wow.
We didn't know that. Thank you.
We couldn't have an icon thing without pictures of the Berlin Fair. Of course, these two shots predate all of us by many years, but we also have the modern day Berlin Fair, which I don't really remember when it reopened in 1949. I was only 2, but I do remember the following year, actually. When just about all of the buildings, they didn't have any permanent buildings, everything was in tents. And certainly come a long way.
You know, somebody told me that the reason it was always in October in one of the later fairs in the state was because they were trying to avoid hurricane season, because they had tents and they'd be very vulnerable. As we know, that our first historical society booth was a tent, and it was always blowing down the wind.
These are a couple of things that we thought we'd put in that I'm hoping, I would love to see some of these things come back. The Firemen's Parade, the Firemen's Carnival, we had such a good time with those. And Yankee Peddler Days. Yeah, they
Do people remember going to these events?
Yeah, they block off Main Street and I remember, go ahead, yeah. Louise, you need,
As the wife of a fireman, volunteer fireman, I got to do a lot of firemen's carnivals and parades, and we enjoyed them a lot. The only thing is it became an issue of liability, and they wanted something like $350,000 for the insurance to run the event for the weekend. And it outpriced, you can't do that with a volunteer organization, it's just way too much money. So that was what happened to the carnivals for the fire department.
At one time, I believe all the fire departments used to go town to town during the course of the summer, and they used to have firemen's parades, and they also used to have all the tug of wars, etc., so they all could get different prizes and awards. And we happened to live on Main Street in East Berlin, and they always picked our front porch as what the review or whatever it was. But they used to be from all over Connecticut. The firemen used to come and be in the parades.
I think like the Yankee Peddler days, they were really popular, but they were held what always seemed to be the hottest day of the year. And I think after a while, people just got tired of being in the heat. But we're kind of hoping somehow to resurrect that and maybe block off Main Street. I'm told by people in the 50s, I think, that there were times when Main Street, Kensington was blocked off and there'd be dances in the street at night. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Yeah, I see some hands risen.
I remember some of those from the 60s. Yeah. That would be a lot of fun. So, petition our town fathers. Okay. Some of our big landmarks, and we didn't hit all of them, but we wanted to put this one of the railroad pond in because there are plans of repairing the dam and doing some work on it so that it really does become a recreational site, which I think would be great.
Yeah, the town wants to build more access to it for boating and hiking and picnicking. And they also want to do a fish ladder near the dam. So I think that's a cool idea. And at one time this pond, there was a proposal to drain it and build houses on it. But fortunately that did not happen. It's right off Main Street. You know the dam that's near the post office on Brook Street?
No, it's not paper goods. It's railroad pond.
That's below paper goods, yeah.
Correct.
It's closer to downtown. It's on the other side of paper goods.
Yeah, I was thinking paper goods, but you're right, that's the one that's below with a big dam there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on the paper goods pond, I don't know whether you're going to show that or not, but for years, the kids would swim in there, and finally Dr. Tchaikovsky, who was the health director, made all of the people on Bristol Avenue get the sewer was going directly into the pond, which wasn't making it too attractive for swimming. But he required, they drained the pond down, and they determined who had the sewer pipes going in, and all of that was corrected, so the water's pretty clean there now.
Well, we had talked about this pond when we had the program on the train station, and then originally it was built to provide water for the steam trains, and then it was piped down to the station, and there were tanks there where they refill.
I just had, okay. This is paper goods pond here, you can see part of it. The photo on the left is the old bridge. Kathy, you had a neat story that you told about fishing from a hole in the...
I just don't know if that's one of the original bridges when I was growing up, because it was more like the lenticular trussed one.
Yeah.
That it was rounded on the top.
Right, yeah.
And there used to be holes on the side in the pavement. And so as kids, what we would do is we would drop a line through the hole, and all you would catch is a Johnny Roach, but pulling them through. But the traffic is going over the bridge, and everybody would just stop because we're fishing through these holes.
It's just a cool story. Okay. This is one. Go ahead.
Well, everybody is familiar with the Spence on Chamberlain Highway, and I'm happy to say that the people live there now, there was some debate about taking it down, and the town asked us, like, is it historic? And I said, it definitely is, and you better not tear that down, so they repaired it. But this dates back to William Sloper, who was a passenger, he was a stockbroker from New Britain, and he was on the Titanic. And there were all these false stories that he had taken on women's dress to jump into the lifeboats, but that was absolutely not true. There were affidavits signed by everybody who was in the boat with him that he was told to get in this half-full boat, lifeboat, because it wasn't full enough. People all went to the other side and were overcrowding boats. And they told him to get in because it was all women and for him to row. And they actually took on other passengers from overcrowded boats. But because he survived and he was a guy, when he got to New York, all these reporters were clamoring for his story, but he wanted to save it to tell his friends who worked for the New Britain Herald and the Hartford Times. So he just brushed them off because he wanted them to have the scoop. But the reporters in New York were upset, and they started spreading this story that he had dressed up as a woman. So unfortunately, Mr. Sloper was kind of hounded by people with the story for the longest time, and he decided to move out to the country back when Kensington was the country and Cat Hole Road was a dirt road. And he moved to this house, and I always thought the fence was built to keep out inquiring people that were bothering him. But I listened to an oral history recently of somebody who knew Mr. Sloper personally, and he said the fence was put up because about that time, Cat Hole Road was becoming Chamberlain Highway, was being paved, and there was going to be a lot more traffic, and he didn't want all that traffic going by his house, and that he had written articles in the paper and protested, but he couldn't stop the development of the road, so he put up the fence. But it's been there for the longest time, and
Chamberlain Highway was put in the 1930s, so
yeah,
it's got to have been there since then.
And that fence is built out of special cypress wood that was brought up from Florida, I guess, and had to be milled specially for it. So that's the Sloper story.
Go ahead, Matt.
I just gotta say, I read the manifest of the Titanic, and there was a Sloper on it.
Yes.
Oh, he was definitely on
He's definitely on it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Jan, yeah. Marilyn will get you.
I was surprised when you said Chamberlain Highway was paved like in the 30s. I would have thought it was a little later than that, but you're probably right.
Well, I'm not sure.
My father,
It was being improved or something.
my father had a commercial photography business, and he photographed the ceremony, which was a little bit further down in front of like where Laviana's windmill is.
Okay.
But they had quite a ceremony
The windmill's at the
at Laviana's Zwick's house.
Zwick's house, yeah. Okay. I'd love to see that picture, Marilyn.
All those pictures were destroyed. They had a big leather suitcase that I took around to this business. It was full of hundreds and hundreds of Americans from places around town that I wanted to give to either Harold, Crown, or never meet my home. But the brick building had a flat roof.
What a loss. You know, Marilyn was saying her parents were, your father was a photographer and took all these old pictures in town, but they were destroyed in a suitcase in the brick house that leaked.
What a shame.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to leave early. I was just telling Pam, this goes back to the Berlin Fair, so I'm sorry that it's not chronological order, but you had said you thought the fair was started in October because of the, what did you say, the weather? But I think it might have been because of the vegetables. It was originally started by an Armenian priest way back years and years ago, and he came to the Kensington Congregational Church.
Right.
And he brought seeds, and he had the children in religious class grow the seeds because they used to do it in Armenia, and then they used to, and so then when the children's produce came, then he had a fair there in that area of the Congregational Church. And that was the first fair. And then they used to have small fairs every year and parades and stuff, but then that disbanded. I guess you know better than me that they stopped having the fair, and then they moved it to different areas. But I wondered if people knew that it was started by an Armenian priest, and secondly that maybe it was in the fall because that's when all the vegetables come out.
Yeah. Well, that was the original.
I have it at home, a whole report on it. My son had done.
Yeah.
And I could give that to you, but I don't remember anything else offhand. It just came to me now as I was, when you mentioned that. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay. All right. I don't know how many of you remember the old town farm and what the significance was. This was on, well, it's now Mysterio Drive, but it was Seymour Road back in the day. The town garage is there now, and luckily the building was dismantled. Pam, we ought to give you the microphone to tell the story, because it's now part of Pam Pethigal's house in East Berlin.
Yeah. Well, one night I went to a town meeting and just told my husband I was going to a meeting, and they were talking about that they were going to knock down the town farm. And I got really upset because somebody else was going to take it down, but then they decided not to. So I said, oh, you can't do that. So they said, do you want it? And I said, sure. So they said, okay, we'll sell it to you for $1. So I went home and my husband said to me, how was your meeting? I said, well, I bought a house. He goes, what? I said, and there's just one hitch. You have to take it down. So it took him almost a year. He took it down, he color-coded and numbered all the boards, and we stored it in our barn. And when it was time, we reconstructed it, and the whole inside is all the interior of the original town farm. And it's part of my house now.
You know, long ago, this was the poorhouse. And I don't know how many people it would house, but I've seen some of the censuses, and they had an awful lot of people living in this little tiny house.
The town jail was also in the basement, and we have the door from it at the museum.
Dr. Fennedy owned it before Camden. Yeah. Right. Yeah. This is a long ago view of this. There's a town farm in the distance. You can see that was all farmland.
So this would be a view from Farmington Avenue,
right,
kind of where the Citgo station is right now.
And we couldn't wait to get to this one.
Okay, so this got posted on Facebook yesterday, and I can't believe all the discussion with it. People are always interested in this house that's at the corner of Episcopal Road and Deming Road. And the Chambrello family lived there for a very long time, and I called Joe Chambrello yesterday. We talked for about an hour about this house because I couldn't remember all the details. But it was built back in 1870 by Samuel Talmadge. And Samuel lived in a house that doesn't exist anymore, which was an older house that if you're going in Deming Road now, where their barn is, and there's a steep driveway up, it's kind of, the foundation is behind there, but Emhart had bought land up to it, and at that time, that house got torn down. But anyhow, the story I had always heard was that Talmadge built this for his bride. But now Joe and I were talking, and it seems more likely that he had this built for either his son or his daughter-in-law or his daughter. We don't know if he had, what children he had. But the other thing that Joe told me was that at the time, there was a builder, he was a Swiss builder, and that he built 5 identical houses to this in Connecticut. And one of them still exists in East Haddam. And he was supposed to send me a picture, but I haven't received it yet. But the one in East Haddam is in perfect condition. But if you look at it, it has exactly the same features. So the other story about this is that it was really built as a farmhouse, but on the outside, it's really built to impress. It's in this grand Victorian, Gothic, exuberant style. It's got every feature on it, but the inside is actually quite plain. You'd think it would have elaborate oak woodwork, but it's very plain pine. So they spent all the money on the outside and very little on the inside. So Joe had told me that his family bought it in 1939. His grandparents bought it from an estate, and he didn't have all the details at hand, but whoever had owned it at that time owned property that was this huge area bordered Deming Road, Christian Lane, South Street, and Episcopal Road, and all that was subdivided and sold in an estate. So that's when they got the house. And at some time his father bought the land that was next to it, and they've been farming it. But he did say that the house, they go into it to check on it, but the cupola is leaking, and there's some problems with the foundation. But one of the things he said he would love to do is have the money to fix it up and open it as a spooky house at Halloween. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But he did say that the outside of it was actually used in 2 movies. They couldn't remember the names of them, and they were kind of B, lesser movies, but I'm trying to find out what they were. No one's living in it now. They're not doing anything with it. He said what had happened was the town rezoned that area as commercial, and they were told once they stopped occupying it that even if they fixed it up that they can't occupy it again because of the zone, and I don't know all the details of that. The Chambrellos still own it. Patsy.
Right, the little widow's walk up on top. Right.
But we have, the painting on the right is by Dave Contino, and it used to hang at the library. And when the library was doing the renovations for the elevator, for some reason or other they didn't want it, and they said, do you want it? I said, of course we want it. So it's hanging at the museum now.
Right.
Yeah, my mother's family owned it before the Chambrellos. They were the Papalachis.
They owned that house, Ernie?
Yeah, and the land on the highway and all that, yeah.
Oh,
And I guess
okay.
when the mother died, the father sold it.
Okay, Joe didn't tell me that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he knows.
Yeah, okay.
I brought pictures to you, but, okay, anyway.
Yeah, no, we have pictures you brought in with it in the distance. I
Yeah,
remember that.
okay, Papalachis sold it.
Okay. Anybody ever been in this house? Wait for a mic.
Patsy and I was sort of, like boyfriend and girlfriend, but my mother became friends with Mary, Patsy's mother. And we went there just before Patsy's father passed away in that house. But it was a very plain old house. But she had a lot of foster children. Mary devoted her life to taking care of foster children.
Right, that's true, that's what Joe told me.
A lot of foster children.
Oh, the other thing he told me was, because he does metal detecting, and one of the things he found there was a silver napkin ring, and it has the date 1869 on it, and the initials BET. So he thinks the T must have been for Talmadge, and it would make sense if this was a wedding gift that it was built about 1870, and the napkin ring said 1869. So we're still researching this, but it really is a cool building.
I lived in that building for quite a while when I was first selectman. And it really was a town hall. Upstairs we had the police department, and then later on we reconstructed the basement for a police department. But they had the Board of Assessors, the tax collector, I can't remember, and of course the town clerk. You'd walk in on the left, the post office was on the left, and on the right was the town clerk, Arthur Woodruff. And Arthur Woodruff was famous for when people came in for their marriage licenses, he always kissed the bride. And he probably kissed more women in this town than anyone would even want to kiss. But he was the old-time town clerk, and everybody loved him, and he lived down the street where
I live.
yeah, she lives. And he would go to work every day on his bicycle. And he'd wave at everyone going. He'd occasionally stop at the store across the street, which was, in the old days, it was Baratiro's store, and then it became Burnham's. And after that, I guess the Worthington Fire District moved in there. But the town hall, also on the first floor, the assessors were on one side and the back, and the tax collector on the other side. But the big open area in there, kids played basketball in there, and also the Berlin Playhouse was there. And lots of plays over the years, and filled the place up. It was great. So it's got quite a history to it, and now when we got the new town hall, we made a mistake. Phil Dorn wanted us to sell it. He was chairman of the Board of Finance, and I was against it, but it was sold because it's such an historic building. And it's just kind of a storehouse now. But it's really a big part of Berlin history, and I was glad to be part of it.
You know, I love the story about Arthur Woodruff. Of course, he rode the bike back and forth, and he lived just the other side of Worthington School. And I asked his grandson, did he ever have a license or drive? And he said he bought a car. He had it for one day, I guess, and he was coming up Farmington Avenue where the monument is and made a turn and somehow crashed into something. And that was it, like he never drove again. But the other story I always liked about him was that because he was going back and forth to work to where he lived a couple times a day because he went home for lunch, there was a girl that went to Worthington School who had polio, and she was in a wheelchair, and he would stop there before he went to town hall and carry her up to the second level so she could attend the upper grades, because they went up to eighth grade on the upper level. And then he would do the same thing coming home from work and take her down, and her father would wheel her home. Maybe you remember that, Art?
Yes, I remember those things. Before we leave, I'd just like to switch over to Worthington School.
Oh, we're going to be talking about Worthington School next, I think. Yeah.
Any questions?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. On the Talmadge House on Downing Road, when you look at it from the front, Episcopal Road is on the right, and I'm wondering if that would have been there when the house was built, or if the original owner owned the whole property down to the Berlin Turnpike where CVS is. Does anybody know?
I think Episcopal Road has been there for a long time. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it predates the house. It's on some of the older maps. Okay. Yeah.
One more on the town hall.
Yeah.
Give me a minute. I think there's some members of the McEwen family here. Yes. When we were kids, we hang around, not kids, but old enough to vote. We hang around Bob's Hot Dog Hut. And Bill, Tubby McEwen, come in and gathered us all up and took us up to the town hall on Weddington Ridge to register us to vote. Well, we all went in. I think he took 2 carloads up. We all went in to vote, and we came out. He says, "How did you register?" He says, "We didn't know. We registered independent." He says, "Get back in there and register Democrat." So we had to go back in. And that note, Tubby McEwen was another great guy in this town, if anybody knew him, and some of his family are here. Thank you.
Yeah, we thought about, because in the icon book, we have some of the important people of our town, but we didn't want to leave people out by just, talking about certain people.
But it's great that their names are coming up anyway, because they're just, some people just, you remember, which is awesome. So,
I think we're close to running out of time, so I don't know if you want to just flip through these monuments.
We can just, these are, if you haven't visited these, you should. This is right in front of, this is on Percival Avenue, in front of the Kensington Congregational Church. It's the oldest Civil War monument, permanent Civil War monument in the country, dedicated in 1863. And come on, okay. We have another one to the Civil War in East Berlin, and that's on Main Street and Berlin Street, right? Okay. The World War I monument. Actually, our speaker is going to be talking about that in a couple of weeks, or a month from now. So we'll be talking about that. You can see the old Berlin Hotel off to the left. They actually had to move the hotel a little bit. We have the Galpin store, a lot of you probably remember this as the First National on Worthington Ridge.
It's still there. It's a white brick building. It's, our beautiful bridge.
Our beautiful bridge, you know. If anybody has anything to say about what they have done to our beautiful bridge, say something. Oh, we know.
I know, and I want to know why.
We know.
We know, but why was it called 7?
Yeah.
But anyhow, in upgrading the tracks and everything, they put all this modern railing stuff on it, and they should have tinted the cement to look like brownstone. They should have had painted brown steel or something.
Right.
So after the fact, I'm working with the State Preservation Office to how are they going to remedy this, because it's just hideous what they did to it.
Some of the stone, they redid that over last year.
Some of the stone that they reconstructed on either end, the actually east and west end it would be, came from the original underpass.
Right.
It was the same middle section construction. Actually, they probably got paid to haul it away, and we paid again the second time to put it back over here. I mean, between you and me. But they put the original brownstone in to repair the ends on that. So they brought back some of it, and that stone actually was brownstone that was taken out of the Portland quarry.
Right.
A lot of that stone that's over here in Berlin came from the Portland quarry.
In our last section, we're going to talk about some of the old schools that a lot of us went to that are no longer with us, the old Percival School. This building, I went through 5th and 6th grade here. And the original Hubbard School. Yeah. Good old KGS in the original Berlin High. So, South School on the Turnpike has been gone for a long time. It burned down, I understand. Yeah. Right. Now, this, believe it or not, is Ledge School. The photo is from a 1938 New Britain Herald article. I don't ever remember it being anything other than red. You remember it, Pete?
I think the first and second grade there.
Yeah, but was it red or was it another color?
It was red.
Yeah, I only remember it as being red, but
Yeah, that school's right on the hill, going up toward a town hall.
right,
It's a community arts center at one time.
right.
And actually, the Hoffmans owned the land down in front of it, and there was no house there when we went to school. And like Pete said, Garrison, we went to school 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade up there.
Right, yeah, my
And I
sister was
believe
with
that
you.
your mom, I think, even taught school over there.
She subbed.
Yeah, and
Because
there was a lot of stories that we had about that. I used to play around up there, and there'd be a lot of snakes on there because it was built on a rock pile up there.
Right.
It was adjacent to the paper goods pond down below. And we'd always go out for recess and stuff. You'd find a snake out, black snake or something, and pick it up with a stick and throw it on the electric fence or so. There was a lot of stories. There was a lot of fun in them days. In fact, your sister, Sally.
No, Peggy.
Peggy, rather, not Sally, your Sally.
Yeah.
Peggy, I went to school with her. She got hit by a bus right in front of that
Oh, I
Genesee.
forgot that.
Yeah, and that was one of the big stories. And she never really got hurt too bad, but back then the buses weren't like they are now.
Right.
But yeah, that school got a lot of history behind it, and yeah, it's a memorable place.
Any other old stories, Harold?
I told this before, but yeah, we used to talk to the bus driver into dropping us off at the corner of Main Street, and we'd go in the candy store, get candy, and then we'd walk to Ledge School. And the other one is, we used to hang on to the electric fence so you could hold on to it the longest. So you want to know why I'm still dinging, yeah.
Do you remember when I snuck on the bus with my sister? I think it was about 4, and I think I was there for a couple of hours, and then my mother came and picked me up. That was fun.
Thank you. I think I remember it white. I started school there in 1941, first grade. And I thought it was white in the beginning. I can't be sure about it, but I've got a lot of nice memories about that place still. 4 years there. I hope they didn't ever tear it down, but I understand it's deteriorating, but we'll see what happens. Maybe the Historical Society will purchase that.
Give us some money and maybe we could. But that would be another great spooky house. So, okay, here's our baby. The photos on the right of the classes, I know the one on the bottom has some kids from our class. Go ahead, Art.
Well, is this on? Okay. Al Nasser and I went 8 grades to Worthing Grammar School. The first grade teacher there were 4 rooms and 2 grades in each room. First grade teacher was Miss Miner, right, Al? And then Miss Conrad did 2nd grade. Then we went on to Miss Mary Mangan today, was Mary Ross. She was in the 3rd and 4th grade with Miss Cross. Then up on top, I may be forgetting one or two, but each teacher had 2 classes, so the kids used to, in first grade, would listen to all the kids in the second grade, so when they went into second grade, they were much smarter than first graders. But in any event, the 7th and 8th grade was Miss McGee, and she was also principal of the school. And she was strict, but everybody loved her. They called her Maggie. And I won't give the name of this person that she sent out in the hallway for being a bad boy. And we were all sitting there, and they were kind of talking. And all of a sudden, we heard a slap. And it was Miss McGee who slapped the boy. And then a couple of seconds later, we heard another slap. And the boy hit the teacher, hit Miss McGee. Needless to say, he came into school the next day with his father. But the janitor of the school was Pop Russell, and he used to have his chair just outside of the men's room. Remember that, Al? Yeah, and he just sat there all day, and he cleaned the school. That was his job. But everybody loved him. But we played ball outside on the right side of the school, and it was a big driveway there, and we'd play softball there. It was a wellness school, and then just in the spring, we had a day that we'd all go to, what was the carnival? It's not a carnival, it's over in Bristol now, or?
Lake Compounds.
Lake Compounds. We'd always go to Lake Compounds, and it was a wonderful place to go, and the kids really got a good education. And the irony is, in those days, all the teachers were women. And that's quite a change from what we see today. So the women were in charge in those days, and then of course the men got involved, and that wasn't necessarily a good thing. But the women are coming back, so we should, really cheer them as much as we can and get them recognized as they should be. But the school was just a wonderful, wonderful place and had a wonderful history.
The thing I wish people could see is in the attic, and maybe you were one of the boys that climbed into the attic, but it has this fantastic truss work with all these beams going this way and that way. It's really complicated, but amazing architectural feat to have put that together. And your initials are up there. I know some of the Woodruffs are up there and other people. Like how you climbed up there, I don't know. I'm told you climbed through the bathroom or something in the hall.
I don't remember, but my mother found out she wasn't very happy.
I would think it would have been dangerous to go up there. Okay, so this is what it looks like now. Of course, it's needing paint again, but we're kind of moving forward again. We're getting new plans for the inside. We've got a lot of good advice now, and there's momentum to make this happen. I'm determined this is going to happen in my generation because it's been adaptively reused over and over. As everybody knows, it was originally a church meeting house back when there was no separation of church and state. Town meetings were there. The church used it. Then it was town hall. Then for many years it was a school, board of ed. Why can't we do this now? It's just really sad that this has not happened. But we are not giving up. And one of the things the Historical Society has done is Esther Woodruff's property behind it. There's a little house that's very close to it and 1.4 acres. And Esther always thought that land really belonged with the meeting house. It would just make such a wonderful complex to have outdoor events there. So we bought it because the town couldn't come up with the money right now to do so. But we're planning on having outdoor events there. It'll take care of some of the parking issues that people thought were a negative to having things go there. But the plan is to have the Historical Society move there and have it be a historical community cultural center where there'd be art shows and lectures and musical things, and people could use it for meetings and so forth, but I just think it could be such an incredible asset for this town. And after losing so many historic buildings in town, I just think we have to make this happen. And we're looking for your support to do that.
We do need your help, so you'll be hearing more about our plans as time goes on, but your support is so crucial to this. And as I said, you'll be hearing more from us. But, you know, our memories are so important. It's so easy to say, oh, this is nothing. This is just an old building. No, it's so much more. And this is something that we can pass on to our children and our grandchildren. And let's do this. Let's make it happen.
Would it be possible to have more, another meeting on these buildings and the town of Berlin? We've gone through this session, we haven't got to the schools really, and how they were built, and there's so many things about this town that perhaps could be brought up at another meeting.
We did do one about schools, Art. I don't know if you missed that one.
Well, that was quite a while ago, wasn't it?
You know, we've been doing these now for over 3 years, so we've covered a lot of neighborhoods and schools and farms and whatnot, but
You've really done a great job, and I think we all appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you. I think we're going to have our drawing for the raffle prize. And the raffle prize includes, like, at the museum, we actually had made a ceramic cup that is a replica of the Anthora cup from American Paper Goods. And we sell that at the museum, but somebody's going to win one today, along with honey. I think.
Thanks to Kathy for putting this together for us.